Called an ugly high school grad and disowned by my family. 11 years later, I saw them at my sister's wedding. Her husband asked, "Do you know her?" I replied, "More than you realize." You know, there are some wounds that never truly heal. Wounds inflicted by the very people who were supposed to protect you. And sometimes, those old scars bleed open again, not in a quiet moment of reflection, but in the most public, most brutal way imaginable, like at your own sister's wedding. It was supposed to be her perfect day, but it became the day I finally reclaimed mine. I stepped into the grand ballroom of the Evergreen Resort and instantly, a cold dread snaked its way around my heart. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across polished marble floors, and the air itself seemed to whisper with old money and hushed respect. Michael's hand found the small of my back, a steadying pressure, grounding me. "Breathe," he murmured, his surgeon's eyes assessing me with that familiar, clinical precision. We earned our place here. Beside us, our son, Leo, tugged at his tiny bow tie, his 6-year-old patience already wearing thin. "Mom, this thing is trying to choke me." I knelt, adjusting the offending fabric with a smile I didn't quite feel. "Just for a little while, buddy. Remember our deal? Good behavior now, swimming pool later." Then, the reception crowd parted, and my breath caught in my throat. A familiar profile. The slight tilt of her head. The way she leaned forward when she laughed. I hadn't seen that gesture in 11 years, but my body remembered it, every nerve ending screaming. The bride turned, champagne glass raised in a toast, and our eyes locked across the room. Grace. My sister. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand, the only outward sign of the earthquake happening inside me. Daniel Brooks. The name on the invitation. I hadn't recognized it. I hadn't made the connection. I just assumed Grace was still using our family name, Collins. Her gasp sliced through the ambient conversation like a blade. Heads turned. The music played on, but a terrifying bubble of silence formed around us, stretching across the divide. Behind her, Mother's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. Father moved, swift and protective, toward Grace, his broad shoulders creating a barrier between us, just as he'd done all our lives. "What are you doing here?" Mother hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to turn with curious eyes. For a heartbeat, that familiar shame rose in my throat. I was 21 again, standing in the rain with a suitcase, homeless and utterly alone. Michael stepped forward, his voice firm but measured. "My wife is a guest. She's the CEO of Mova." We were personally invited by the groom. The name Mova rippled through the cluster of medical professionals nearby. I heard whispers. Saw recognition dawn in their eyes. "CEO." A woman in a burgundy dress turned to her companion. "That's Amber Collins." The rain from that night still felt cold on my skin, though it was a distant memory now. "If you're too ungrateful to help at the clinic, don't come back." Father's words echoed. The slam of our front door, final as a judge's gavel. Now I stood tall in Valentino. The scared girl was gone. In her place, a woman who built something from nothing. A woman who refused to disappear. Dr. Daniel Brooks approached, confusion creasing his brow. His gaze darted between Grace's frozen face and my composed one. "You know the CEO of Mova?" He asked my parents, then turned to me with growing interest. "We've been trying to partner with them for months. Your patient monitoring system is revolutionizing post-surgical care." Grace attempted a smile, but it faltered. Mother and father exchanged panicked glances. The whispers among the wedding guests grew louder, more insistent. I could have made a scene. I could have exposed 11 years of lies. I could have told Daniel how they'd claimed I'd failed out of college, how they'd painted me as irresponsible while quietly pocketing my tuition money for Grace's benefit. The power was finally mine. But instead, I simply said, "Hello, Grace. Congratulations." The simplicity landed like a thunderclap. Grace flinched as if I'd shouted. Michael's hand returned to my back, a silent question. Stay or go? Leo looked up at me, innocent to the dark currents swirling around us. "Mom, is that lady in the white dress your friend?" Daniel's gaze sharpened. He looked between Grace and me, his new bride and the stranger who was clearly not a stranger. Grace, he said, confusion and the first notes of suspicion lacing his voice. I thought you said your sister was. His voice trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging heavy between us. Grace's eyes darted frantically between her new husband and her parents. For the first time in my life, I watched her struggle for words. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly regretted it? The smart move, the easy move, would have been to grab my family and quietly slip away. Let Grace have her perfect day. Let sleeping dogs lie. But sometimes, regret is just fear wearing a mask. And I stopped being afraid a long, long time ago. And this is my wife, Grace. Daniel beamed, his arm sliding around her waist as he introduced her to a cluster of doctors. Stanford graduate and the brilliant mind managing her family's medical practice back in Vermont. I stood 10 feet away, my champagne untouched, watching my sister nod demurely. Her pearl earrings caught the light when she tilted her head, a gesture I recognized from childhood, the tell that meant she was about to stretch the truth. The Collins Clinic has been serving our community for 30 years, she said, her voice pitched perfectly between pride and humility. We specialize in family medicine with some geriatric care. Michael touched my elbow, drawing my attention to a conversation unfolding beside us. A silver-haired woman in an elegant pantsuit noticed my name badge, Mova. Her eyes widened. You're Amber Collins. Your presentation at last month's medical summit was brilliant. The patient monitoring system you've developed is changing post-surgical recovery protocols across 3 states now. 4, actually, I smiled. We just finalized implementation with Northwestern's hospital network. Across the room, Grace fumbled through a response about platelet therapy trends. The doctor questioning her exchanged a subtle glance with his colleague. I thought Stanford's medical program had shifted away from that approach 3 years ago, he said, brow furrowed. Grace's laugh floated a pitch too high. Well, you know how these academic debates go. Some professors hold on to traditional methodologies longer than others. Daniel's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. His eyes tightened. A slight withdrawal of his arm from her waist. He was noticing the discrepancy. Amber. The voice behind me belonged to my father. 11 years older, but unmistakable. The same commanding tone that once sent me scurrying to answer phones at the clinic after school while Grace practiced piano. You need to leave, he said, positioning himself between me and the rest of the room. You're ruining Grace's day. Michael stiffened beside me, but I placed a steadying hand on his arm. I was invited by Daniel, I replied, my voice low but firm. Perhaps you should explain why that upsets you. Father's face reddened. The expensive suit he wore couldn't disguise the man beneath, a small-town doctor whose authority stopped at the borders of his own practice. Don't play innocent. You, showing up like this, flaunting your whatever company you claim to run. Mova is hardly a claim. Dennis, Michael stepped forward, every inch the Harvard-trained surgeon. The medical technology conference in Boston last month featured your daughter as the keynote speaker. Her monitoring systems are in 27 hospitals nationwide. A nearby guest turned, clearly recognizing the company name. Across the room, my mother hovered near Grace, desperately trying to steer Daniel's colleagues away from my direction, her hands fluttering like panicked birds. Too late. The connections were already forming throughout the room. Medical professionals recognizing my name, making associations. Leo tugged at my hand. Mom, can I have some cake now? You promised. In a minute, sweetheart. Leo looked past me, eyes fixed on Grace. Is that lady your sister? Does she go to Stanford like you did? My father's face drained of color. Before he could respond, Leo continued innocently, you showed me your old college pictures. The red buildings were pretty. Grace, who had drifted closer, froze. Stanford, Daniel said, looking between us. You went to Stanford too, Amber? Class of 2014, I answered simply. Daniel's colleague, a distinguished cardiologist, turned to Daniel. You didn't mention your wife's sister was Amber Collins. Her work on predictive algorithms for post-surgical complications is revolutionary. Northwestern Medical has reduced readmission rates by 22% using her systems. The weight of 11 years of lies settled visibly on Grace's shoulders. She reached for Daniel's arm, but he stepped slightly away, his attention now fully on the professional conversation happening around me. Rain drummed against my dorm window as I stared at the bank statement. The numbers weren't computing. My college fund. Depleted. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. The same day, a package arrived from Grace. Photos of her spring break in Cancun, the trip I couldn't understand how our family could afford. I shook off the memory, focusing on the present. Daniel had pulled Grace aside, their heated whispers visible across the ballroom. His face reflected growing confusion, then disbelief. Then something harder as she clutched at his sleeve. "You told me you graduated from Stanford," he said, his voice rising just enough to carry. "I went there. I've never heard your name mentioned by any of the faculty." Grace's response came frantically. It was mostly remote learning, a special program they had for. Stanford Medicine doesn't offer remote degrees. Daniel's voice had gone cold. Never has. Color drained from Grace's face as she realized her carefully constructed life was beginning to collapse. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on mine with desperation. Daniel stepped back from her, straightened his tie, and turned. With deliberate steps, he walked across the ballroom, away from Grace, directly toward me. Behind him, Grace's pleading eyes followed. A drowning woman watching her last lifeline walk away. Daniel guided me away from the crowd with a gentle hand on my elbow. His fingers trembled slightly against my skin, the only indication that the poised doctor was rattled. "Let's find somewhere quieter," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes darting back to where Grace stood with my parents, their heads bent together in urgent conversation. We settled in a small alcove at the edge of the ballroom. 2 plush chairs, a small table between us. The muted lighting cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of confusion etched there. "I apologize for the awkwardness," he began, straightening his bow tie. His words trailed off, uncertain how to frame the chasm of questions between us. "You didn't know Grace had a sister," I finished for him, keeping my voice neutral. Daniel's eyes widened. "She mentioned a sister once, but said you dropped out of college after a semester, that you couldn't handle the pressure and disappeared." The old wound throbbed, but I didn't flinch. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught me to keep my face composed, even when bleeding internally. "I graduated summa cum laude," I said simply, while working 3 jobs. 3 jobs? His brow furrowed. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the hospital reception desk, weekends at a call center. The memories flooded back, the bone-deep exhaustion, falling asleep over textbooks, the relentless push forward. I put myself through school part-time, no family support. Each word landed like a stone between us, ripples spreading outward. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to calculation, the surgeon's analytical mind reassessing everything he thought he knew. "Stanford?" he asked, naming his alma mater. I shook my head. "Community college first, then state university." I couldn't afford Stanford after I discovered my college fund had been. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Reallocated to Grace's education," he concluded, the pieces clicking into place. The ballroom around us blurred as memory surfaced. Sleeping on Sarah's lumpy couch for 6 months. Showering at the YWCA when Jamie's boyfriend kicked me out. Eating ramen for weeks straight to save for textbooks. The humiliation of asking professors for extensions because I couldn't stay awake after triple shifts. The hospital where I worked reception, I continued. That's where I met Michael. He was a resident then. I remembered that night clearly, hunched over healthcare administration textbooks during my dinner break, exhaustion pulling at my eyelids. Michael stopping at my desk, curious about the complex diagrams I'd sketched in the margins. "You understand Kellerman's patient flow theory?" he'd asked, surprised. "It's flawed," I'd replied without looking up. "The bottleneck isn't intake. It's documentation requirements between departments." He'd pulled up a chair, and we talked until my break ended. The next day, he brought coffee and questions about my ideas for streamlining patient monitoring. Within months, we were developing the prototype that would become Mova's cornerstone product. Daniel leaned forward. "And Mova? Grace mentioned you worked some office job." I couldn't help the small smile that touched my lips. We started in our apartment 7 years ago. Last quarter's revenue was just under 400 million. Across the room, I spotted my parents flanking Grace like sentinels. Dennis paced small circles, his face flushed with anger, while Margaret clutched Grace's arm, her knuckles white with tension. They cast frantic glances our way, whispering urgently. "They're going to try to separate us soon," I said calmly. Daniel followed my gaze. "They appear concerned." Michael approached us, phone discreetly positioned at his side. I recognized his strategy, documenting behavior while appearing casual. A protective measure we'd learned after years of navigating hostile business environments. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his surgeon's eyes performing a quick assessment of my well-being. "Just catching up," I replied, gratitude warming my chest. The man standing beside me, steady, brilliant, saw me as I was, not as my family's convenient narrative. On cue, Margaret bustled toward us, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Daniel, there's someone from Boston General dying to meet you." Her eyes slid past me as if I were invisible. A familiar sensation. Daniel stood his ground. In a moment, Margaret, Amber and I are having an important conversation. My mother's smile stiffened. Always the attention seeker, Amber. She turned to the nearest cluster of guests. She's always been jealous of her sister's accomplishments. The statement hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. I remained seated, back straight, face composed. Michael's hand rested on my shoulder, a silent anchor. When the bathroom door swung closed behind me 20 minutes later, I wasn't surprised to find Grace already inside, reapplying mascara with trembling hands. Our eyes met in the mirror. "Why are you doing this to me?" she demanded, her voice breaking. I washed my hands slowly, deliberately. "Doing what exactly?" "Ruining my wedding. Making Daniel question everything." Tears streaked her carefully applied makeup. "I'm not doing anything," I replied softly. "I'm simply existing." Grace slammed her mascara wand onto the marble counter. "You were supposed to stay gone. They told everyone you were a dropout," she continued, words tumbling out like a confession. "That you couldn't handle responsibility, that you were. And yet here I am," I interrupted, handling quite a lot. When I emerged from the bathroom, my composure was intact. I returned to Michael's side, to the warmth of his hand finding mine. Grace followed minutes later, makeup freshly applied, but something essential had shattered behind her eyes. I noticed it immediately, the subtle shift in the room. Wedding guests gradually drifting toward us, drawn by genuine curiosity. A neurosurgeon discussing patient monitoring innovations with Michael. A hospital administrator slipping me her card. "Your postoperative monitoring system reduced our complication rates by 30%, she told me. "We'd love to explore expanding its implementation." Daniel stood at my elbow, attentive to the conversation, asking insightful questions about Mova's technology. His new bride hovered at the periphery unmoored. Father approached, shoulders squared for battle. "Daniel," he interrupted loudly. "This is Grace's wedding. Let's focus on her accomplishments." The silence that followed filled the room like water, drowning everything else. All eyes flicked between Daniel and Dennis, then to Grace, whose smile stretched thin across her face. No one spoke. No one needed to. Sometimes silence held more truth than any words could express. I handed my half-empty champagne flute to a passing server and checked my watch. We'd stayed long enough. Michael caught my eye across the room where he was extricating himself from a conversation with an enthusiastic orthopedic surgeon. His slight nod confirmed we were on the same wavelength as always. "Are we leaving now?" Leo tugged at my hand, hope brightening his eyes. "Swimming pool time?" "Yes, buddy. Just one more thing." I pulled a small, cream-colored envelope from my clutch. Inside rested a certificate for Mova stock. Not life-changing money, but enough to make a statement. This is who I am now, not the desperate girl they threw away. Michael joined us, his hand finding the small of my back. "Ready?" "Almost." I scanned the room for Daniel. The poor man deserved some courtesy on his wedding day, even if his in-laws didn't. We found him near the bar, watching Grace with an expression I recognized too well, the first hints of doubt creeping into what should be certainty. My sister worked the room with practiced charm, but now I noticed how she flinched slightly when medical terms entered the conversation. How quickly she redirected. "We're heading out," I told Daniel, offering the envelope. "Congratulations again." He took it with genuine warmth. "Thank you for coming. Especially considering." His eyes drifted toward my parents, who hovered nearby like vultures circling wounded prey. "I appreciate the invitation," I said. "I mean it. Closing this chapter matters more than I realized." Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping. "I'd like to visit Mova sometime. Professionally." Our eyes met, understanding passing between us without words. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. "My assistant will set it up." I offered my business card, aware of Grace watching us, her smile cracking at the edges like old porcelain. Mother glided toward us, social armor firmly in place. Amber was always so driven, she told a nearby guest with calculated lightness. Of course, she had advantages we couldn't provide Grace. The blatant reversal of truth would have wounded me once. Now it was almost comical. "What advantages were those, Mrs. Collins?" Michael asked innocently. "The 3 jobs while putting herself through night school? Or sleeping on friends' couches after you took her tuition money?" Mother's face hardened, but a cluster of Daniel's colleagues had drifted within earshot. She recoiled a step, recalculating. Leo looked up at me, confusion clouding his face. "Aren't those people your family, Mom?" The question silenced everyone within hearing distance. Simple, direct, unintentionally devastating. I knelt to his level. "They're relatives, buddy. Family is different." Father chose this moment to approach, puffing up his chest like he did when I was young and easily intimidated. "You can't just waltz back into our lives. And I'm not interested in walking back into anything." My voice cut through his bluster with quiet finality. "I'm not here to expose you or reconcile with you. I built my own life, which is exactly what you forced me to do when you showed me the door." The image flashed unbidden. Rain soaking through my jacket, the weight of my suitcase, the terrifying freedom of having nothing left to lose. Behind me, Leo fidgeted with his bow tie again. Michael rested his hand on our son's shoulder, steadying him the way he steadied me all those years ago when I thought I'd drown. "Thank you," I told my parents, causing them to blink in confusion. "Thank you for not giving me a chance. You made me build my own." Mother's face contorted between rage and social preservation. For once, she found no words. I took Leah's hand. Michael fell into step beside us as we made our exit unhurried, dignified, complete. No dramatic declarations, no tearful scenes, just the quiet power of walking away whole. Whispers followed us like gentle rain. But unlike that night 11 years ago, they didn't touch me. I'd built an umbrella of accomplishment that shielded me from their storms. In the lobby, Leo broke free and spun with childish delight. "Pool time. 10 minutes to change, and I'll meet you there," Michael told him, ruffling his hair. As we crossed toward the elevators, I caught our reflection in the polished marble wall, a family of 3, solid and connected. Behind us, through the ballroom doors, I glimpsed Daniel watching our departure, then turning back to his new bride with new questions in his eyes. Some weddings mark beginnings. This one marked an ending. The final release of expectations I never needed to fulfill, approval I no longer sought, and pain I refused to carry forward. Leo punched the elevator button with enthusiastic determination. "Up we go." "Yes," I smiled, squeezing his hand. Up we go indeed. Sunlight angled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. 1 month had passed since Grace's wedding, but the memory still lurked in corners of my mind like a half-forgotten dream. I scanned the partnership. Proposal from Boston Memorial. A contract worth 8 figures sprawled across my desk. Mova's patient monitoring system reduced post-surgical complications by 37% in their trial run. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't play favorites. My assistant Meredith's voice crackled through the intercom. "Dr. Daniel Brooks is here to see you." My pen stilled against the paper. I hadn't spoken to my sister's husband since that night. "Send him in." Daniel entered like a man carrying invisible weight. His shoulders curled forward, his suit jacket wrinkled at the elbows. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." He stood awkwardly until I gestured toward the chair opposite my desk. "Coffee?" I offered. He shook his head. "I can't stay long." I waited. Experience had taught me the power of silence. "I've consulted with a lawyer about annulment possibilities." The words tumbled out like stones. Everything Grace told me was fabricated. She never attended Stanford. She never managed your parents' clinic. She's the receptionist. I absorbed this without surprise. The lies were always there, waiting for someone to notice. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "Your parents made her the face of their practice while they—" His voice trailed off as he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "The billing practices at their clinic. They've been charging Medicare for procedures never performed, using outdated codes deliberately. Grace helped them do it." The revelation landed like a slap, not because it was shocking, but because it confirmed suspicions I'd buried years ago. "I didn't mean to drag you back into this," Daniel continued. "But when I started investigating Grace's background, I found patterns, discrepancies. Your name kept appearing in old clinic records, then vanishing completely 11 years ago. The skyline beyond my window shimmered in the summer heat. I'd built this view from nothing while they built their lives on fabrications. They used my college fund for Grace," I said simply. When I confronted them, they told me I wasn't Stanford material anyway. Daniel winced. "The irony is, I never wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to improve medical systems, make them more efficient, more accurate." "You've done that," Daniel said, glancing around my office. "Mova is transforming post-surgical care across the country." A silent stretch passed between us, comfortable in its honesty. "The clinic is being investigated," he finally said. I submitted anonymous information to the proper authorities after discovering the extent of the fraud. They've been doing this for nearly 15 years. 15 years. Beginning right around the time I left for college. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Picking up Leo early. Zoo day. Join us." A warmth spread through my chest. This was my real family now. "What will you do?" I asked Daniel. He straightened his shoulders. "File for annulment. Cooperate with investigators. Start over." He hesitated. "I came to apologize for my unwitting role in reconnecting you with your past and to ask, do you plan to get involved in the investigation?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I could destroy them completely. One phone call from the CEO of Mova to the Medicare fraud investigators would accelerate everything. "No," I said finally. "I built my life separate from theirs. I intend to keep it that way." Relief washed across his face. "Thank you for seeing me." After Daniel left, I stood at my window watching traffic flow 40 stories below. My phone vibrated with a voicemail notification. Grace's number. The third this week. Michael called as I was gathering my things to meet them at the zoo. "You sound tired," he said. "Daniel Brooks came to see me. The family clinic is under investigation for Medicare fraud." A pause. "Are you okay?" "Yes." The answer surprised me with its truth. "Are you going to get involved?" I watched a red-tailed hawk circle the skyscrapers, riding thermals with effortless grace. "I was thinking about what you said last week, about how my success is already their greatest punishment." "I stand by that," Michael said. "But it's your choice." My computer chimed with an incoming email. An attorney representing the Medicare Fraud Investigation Division requesting information about my time at Collins Family Practice. Attached were documents requiring my testimony. "They want me to testify," I told Michael. "What will you do?" I considered the question. Part of me wanted to delete the email, refuse the request, let whatever happened to them happen without my fingerprints anywhere near it. Another part remembered patients who trusted them. Elderly men and women whose Medicare benefits were stolen. "I'll forward them copies of the clinic's original records from when I worked there," I decided. Nothing more, nothing less. Just the facts. "I'm proud of you," Michael said. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Grace. Her third today. The first one begged for money. The second threatened to tell Leo the truth about his mother. I didn't need to hear the third. I pressed delete without listening. The small action felt surprisingly final. Leo wants to see the new tiger cubs, Michael said, his voice a welcome anchor to my real life. Tell him I'm on my way. I gathered my bag, pausing at the door to look back at my office. The Boston Memorial contract waited on my desk. Another hospital ready to implement the system I built from nothing but determination and long nights. I closed the door behind me, leaving Grace's voicemail in digital oblivion where it belonged. Some debts can never be repaid. Some wounds never fully heal. But I've learned that moving forward doesn't require forgiveness. Sometimes it just requires letting go. The purple coneflowers bent towards sunlight. I pinched back another spent bloom, adding it to the collection in my palm. 6 months had passed since the wedding. 6 months of breathing easier, like finally stepping out of shoes that never quite fit. Leo raced between the raised beds, his Batman cape fluttering behind him. Mom, can I water the tomatoes? Start with the peppers, I told him, pointing to the drooping leaves. They're thirsty today. He grabbed his small watering can, tongue poking out the corner of his mouth as he concentrated on not spilling. The mid-May sun warmed my shoulders through my t-shirt. No designer labels here. Just comfort in my own space. Michael appeared at the patio door, 3 glasses of lemonade balanced on a tray. Reinforcements, he called, descending the steps into our modest garden. His surgeon's hands, the same ones that perform delicate heart valve replacements, now passed lemonade to our son with exaggerated ceremony. Thank you, good sir. Leo responded with a wobbly bow that nearly spilled his drink. Michael's eyes met mine over Leo's head. The unspoken conversation passed between us. This is what matters. This garden, this boy, this life we built from nothing but determination and truth. The Davis Hospital Board approved the patient monitoring system, Michael said casually, though we both knew what this meant. The 5th major hospital chain to adopt Mova's technology this year alone. Thousands more patients who would recover safely because of what we created. That's number 5. Leo announced proudly, counting on his fingers. Mom's helping all the sick people get better faster. I ruffled his hair, amazed at how he absorbed everything. That's the idea, buddy. The doorbell chimed from inside. Michael raised an eyebrow. Expecting something? FedEx, probably. Those component samples from Switzerland. But when Michael returned, his expression had shifted. He held a certified letter. The return address visible even from where I stood. Grace Collins Brooks. My stomach tightened. The familiar knot I thought I'd finally untangled. I'll be in my office. The envelope sat on my desk for 17 minutes while I finished reviewing quarterly projections. Michael leaned against the doorframe. Silent support. When I finally slid it open, a single sheet of cream-colored stationery slid out, covered in Grace's careful handwriting. Amber, the clinic closed last month. Not because of anything you did, but because of everything Mom and Dad did. The investigation found billing irregularities going back 15 years. Daniel left me. He said he couldn't build a life with someone he couldn't trust. He was right. I'm not writing to ask for money. I know better now. I'm writing because I need to tell you that you were never the problem. I was raised to believe your intelligence threatened mine. Your independence undermined my security. I believed them when they said cutting you off was necessary. I was wrong. They were wrong. And I'm sorry. Grace. Michael didn't ask what it said. He waited until I folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. What will you do? He asked. Nothing dramatic, I answered, turning to my computer. I opened a document, typed for several minutes, then printed a single page. I slid it into a Mova envelope with the letter I'd written. 2 weeks later, I stood at the edge of the American Medical Technology Conference in Chicago, watching my team demonstrate our latest innovations to a crowd of healthcare professionals. The red Mova booth drew attention, our reputation preceding us now. A flash of movement caught my eye. Someone in pale blue scrubs near the education pavilion. Grace. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, listening intently to a speaker discussing entry-level medical coding certification. Our eyes met across the crowded exhibition hall. No gasps this time, no drama, just quiet recognition. She held the Mova internship application I'd sent her, clutched like a lifeline. I offered a small nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. She returned it, eyes bright with something that might be determination. We didn't approach each other. Some relationships are completed, not continued. That evening, I finalized the paperwork for the Collins first-generation medical scholarship. Not named for my parents, but reclaiming my birth name for something better. 20 students without family support will receive full tuition and mentorship next fall. Back home, I knelt in our garden again, digging small holes for new seedlings. Leo helped, his small hands patting soil around tender roots. Some plants don't grow well next to others, I explained, showing him how to space the seedlings. They need their own space to thrive. Like people, he asked, surprisingly perceptive. Smart boy, I whispered, kissing his forehead. Yes, like people. The sun slanted golden across our yard. Through the kitchen window, I saw Michael preparing dinner, moving easily through the space we'd created together. I pressed another seed into the dark earth, covering it gently. Some roots are given. Others, you get to choose.